strange person, Lily Tomlin, sitting in the big chairs, on Laugh-In, we used to have Laugh-In all. I think so. And she sat in a big rocking chair. And
Lily Tomlin.
we're dating ourselves, right? Or I am. Yeah. I'll laugh.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. My name is Ron Biggio. I'm the Vice Chairman. Chairman Russell Gagner is not here, so I'll be running the meeting. On my left, Diane Morrow, member. Right is Pat Boubert, John Campbell. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 23rd meeting.
Microphone on, Ron.
I don't know. You can't hear me?
You have to put it on.
This has to do with the station.
do we-
You can't hear anything at home.
We all have to put them on?
I guess we do. I don't know. I thought that there would be a timer on the table. but maybe not.
Can you hear me now?
Sound check.
I will entertain a motion for the May 23rd minutes.
I second the motion.
I need a motion.
Oh, I need a motion that we accept it.
I need a second.
I second it.
Is there any discussion about approving the May 23rd minutes which were circulated to us?
Nope.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-0. On the agenda tonight is an administrative appeal submitted by David Springer regarding 398 School Street, R3 zone. Mr. Springer is appealing a code enforcement officer decision to deny a permit for a medical marijuana production facility in a garage. The way that we're gonna proceed this evening is I will generally follow the rules of Robert's procedure, all right? Mr. Springer, are you here, sir? All right. You, your representative will go forward, all right, and present your case. After that, we'll have Mr. Roussel address us, if that's necessary, on behalf of the community, and then we'll talk to the abutters. We'll have the abutters address us. Generally like to run these pretty much informal in the sense that we can ask questions and back and forth to each other. If it gets unruly, I'm gonna call a halt to that, and all questions will be directed through me. Is that clear for everybody? So if we can conduct ourselves in a reasonable manner, we'll let interchange between parties go on. Otherwise, I will direct all questions and comments through me. All right. Mr. Springer, you're up.
Good evening. I'm Tammy Snow. I'm Mr. Springer's attorney. And I'm assuming that everyone got the packet that Mr. Springer submitted, the appeal along with the letter that I had written and some attachments. Is that
That is, I have.
okay? Has everyone gotten that? And have you had a chance to read it?
Yes.
Yes.
It basically goes through the timeline of what has happened here. So in a nutshell, Dave was approved back in January of 2017 to build some buildings that were going to be used for marijuana cultivation. And as you can see in the letter, and I also submitted a timeline along with it, he began the first building, and then as he was in progress with that building and he got the necessary permits and so on, as he was in progress with that building, he started the second building. And then as he was in progress and as he finished the first, then he started the third building. So there was overlap that's been going on since January of 2017. And I included in the packet is a letter that he received from the code enforcement officer saying that he had permission to develop this land and to build buildings on the land. There was no time limit on how long he had to build these buildings, and there was no limit on the number of buildings. So he proceeded to do this the entire time involving the code enforcement officer. And then last November, he had already begun clearing the land for this fourth building. last November, the town put in an ordinance that said that he couldn't have a medical marijuana facility on this land because it could only be on, what is it, Route 4 and Route 236, not on Route 9. So he talked with the code enforcement officer, various people. He was told various things that, well, maybe he could do it as a manufacturing facility instead of a grow facility. Maybe he could do it as a bakery and wouldn't have to get permission to do that. So he was told various things along the way, starting back in January of this year. Since January of this year, he has been on hold, basically. He's continued working on the building, but he's been on hold on being able to get an occupancy permit because of the change in the zoning. So he had already begun work for this building when the zoning changed. He had relied upon the letter that he got from the code enforcement officer saying that he could build these buildings for medical marijuana production. He relied in good faith on those things and proceeded work, and now he's basically at a standstill in being able to use this building. Now, if I were sitting in your shoes, I would be saying, well, can't he use this building for something else? Does it have to be medical marijuana cultivation? The thing is, Dave has done a really nice job. I don't know if you've seen the property, but you go into the property, there's a driveway into the property, and eventually this will all be paved. There's a security gate that requires, it's a code, right, Dave? Requires a code to get into, and he did that because it is medical marijuana cultivation that's going on in there. So he wanted to make sure that it was extremely secure. That's a selling point to his tenants because they like the security. There's a fence that goes all the way around, a security fence that goes all the way around, and then he has currently these 3 buildings, and then the 4th that he's wanting to get this occupancy permit for. So in order to get to the 4th building, you go through the gate. If he were to use that for some other purpose, it would defeat the whole purpose of having the security for the medical marijuana cultivators, because now you're letting in people who are not in that industry, who may not be checked out, and so it would defeat the whole purpose of all this security, fencing and gate and so on that he's put in, and would also lower the value of the rental to his tenants, because that's part of the value in them growing there. I'm sure you know that medical marijuana cultivation facilities need a lot of security. That's really important to the people who are doing this. So that's part of the value of the building. So if he's not able to use this building for that, he's losing a lot of value in what he's put in to this land. Do you have any questions for me or for Dave?
You have any questions? At this time, Pat, you got any questions at this time?
At this time, will we be able to ask questions all along, or?
Well, you want me to answer your question?
Yes.
Do you have any questions at this time? If you're asking me, will I allow you to ask questions of Attorney Snow later? The answer is yes.
Okay.
Do you have any questions now?
I do think I have some questions now. One thing is on November 7th of 2017, the town enacted the ordinance that changed where medical marijuana facilities could go. And you have written in your timetable on October 2017 that Mr. Springer began excavation and grading to build a 4th building as part of the operation. I would like to know what you have for proof of that happening.
I could submit slips from Perkins.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Excavation. Yeah.
I can't hear you very well. Sorry.
I could submit, slips on. Oh. What I could do is give you receipts on Gary Perkins.
Not upstairs?
Gary Perkins is the excavation company that did the clearing and stuff on me, stumping. So I could prove the timeline, if that's what you're asking me.
Yes,
Yeah,
I am.
yeah, that I could give you.
And I think it's supposed to be significant work. So,
Yeah, what-
so at that point, you had done the
Well,
grade.
what he did, On the day of occupancy on the building 3,
Excuse me a minute. Want to check that out, Joe? Please. Yeah, right.
Sounds like it's going on all over.
Trying to find treasure in the walls.
Well, that might be that. Is that play group still up there then?
yeah.
Oh, I don't know, maybe.
Just looking for slips.
Maybe that's why that window was open up there, yeah.
They all have a hammer,
Well, the perk test was done in
their
January.
favorite thing.
Oh, okay.
You know, because I took the clearing and stuff.
I bet, yeah. I broke a blood vessel in my eye. It's getting better. Just freaks everybody out.
It was when we got
Freaks
occupancy.
everybody out.
Built this one,
Like that.
it's a job on the floor.
The evil eye.
How are you?
Hello.
Do I have to sign anything?
No, haven't seen.
No.
We're having a pause at the moment. so. Since they changed this,
It'll be pretty much where it was.
They were what, Joe?
They're pounding the cover on a paint can closed. It's like do it somewhere else.
All right, so the question was, I understand, Mr. Pat, that you wanted some,
Yeah,
whether
that's-
Mr. Springer had any proof of the October 17 statement on his timeline that he began excavation and grading to build a fourth building, and he's indicated that you
Absolutely.
was.
That's
you
not a
have-
problem.
You have the slips, or you could
Yeah, I
produce the
could,
slips.
I could
and-
produce that, but
Let me finish, sir, please. He said he could produce the slips from Perkins Construction. Do you have any more questions, Pat?
Um, Okay. Okay, let's,
Do you have a clean copy of that timeline?
Do you-
I marked mine all up. Anybody, is your copy clean?
I have,
I think mine
I
is.
have one that I.
Is yours clean? Hang on a second.
I
believe
have,
so.
all right, this
You
is
mean the-
Joe's,
I may have another in here.
Hang on a second.
these questions.
Hang on.
This?
Okay, let's just move on, I guess.
Unless you have any objection, I'm gonna, mark this Exhibit 1, the timeline.
Is it the one that's marked Exhibit C in the
No,
Oh.
D.
D.
D? Okay.
Oh, no, he wants, no, I want the other one.
Oh.
If you want C.
Exhibit C, yeah.
I'm gonna cross out your C, Attorney Snow, and mark it Exhibit 1.
Good.
All right, go ahead, Pat.
Okay. Most of my other questions are coming from the permits themselves and that kind of thing, so should that be for Joe pretty much, or?
Ron, can I elaborate on one thing that will help with the timeline?
Go ahead.
On the occupancy of Building 3, I met Joe and myself and Kim Nickerson were in the front parking lot of Building 3. When I got occupancy, that was the beginning of November of last year. And what we already do, which Joe will be able to vouch for, we already had started clearing Building 4 and a little bit of where Building 5 was gonna go. So I already I was talking to the code department on Building 4. It was not like I came in on January asking for a permit. We were already talking and discussing about a Building 4. And what I kind of messed up on, I guess, on my part, is the zoning change. I wasn't aware of this Route 9, 236, and Route 4 rezoning the medical marijuana. I mean, shouldn't I have been notified by code where I was discussing the 4th building with him? It isn't like now I came in with a permit in January. We already talked about this building back in November. So shouldn't I have been aware of something happening before it happened? Meaning like, I mean, I was not aware of any of these code zoning changes. You know, we were and we did, and Joe can testify that we were there working on the lots. I started the lots back in October, you know, so, you know, clearing, it takes a road to get to Building 4, takes some clearing, some fill to be hauled in, you know. I had everything completed in December, and that's the septic design perk test, you know, the engineer for that. But I mean, I didn't know I was on any type of time restraint, you know. I wasn't aware of the zoning change when I went in for my permit. So I just think I should have known, talking to Joe in November, that something was gonna happen. I mean, I could have pulled the permit immediately the next day. And I didn't know there was an issue at all. So that's really the biggest argument is, you know, is that really my negligence? Where, I mean, we were talking about it, we seen, you know, we were clearing the lot at the time. This is, you know, it's where I wanted to put Building 5, Joe. I'm thinking I'm starting Building 4 first. So it's not nothing that we didn't discuss. You know, it isn't like, you know, I'm coming to you asking for this when I've been discussing it all along. I don't know what to say there, you know?
Anything else?
No, that's it then, sorry. I'll sit down.
Oh, you got any more questions at this time, Pat?
I think I'll move on. Ask them in a few minutes.
Okay. John? Do you have any questions at
Not,
this time?
not right now.
Is there anything else you want to present? Any witnesses or any other
No.
information? If you don't mind, I'm gonna mark your Exhibit D, which is another timeline, I guess,
Right, it's just a graphic form of
a graphic
the
form. I'll mark
timeline.
that
Right,
Exhibit
it's the same
2.
thing.
I'll mark that Exhibit 2.
That's just to show the overlap
Okay.
in the time.
I'll mark it Exhibit 2.
Oh, yes, sorry.
And I'm gonna mark the December 14, 2016 letter that you referred to from Mr. Roussel. And it's addressed to whomever it may concern. David Springer came into the office to inquire about a medical marijuana operation conducted at this property. This is allowed under agriculture in our zoning regulations. This would be permitted at this time. If you have any concerns, you can contact this office at 1-207-698-1101, extension 122, Exhibit 3.
Yes. And may I add one thing about the agriculture? When we went to the planning board, there was a question that came up about whether or not medical marijuana is considered agriculture. And I included in my letter how the state does consider medical marijuana to be agriculture. And in fact, someone cultivating medical marijuana can get a sales tax exemption on things, anything related to the grow under, it's an agricultural sales tax exemption. There are various other ways that the state looks at this as agriculture. So if that was a question, at least according to the way that the state defines it, this is an agricultural endeavor.
I have a question now.
Excuse me just a minute. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that Attorney Snow's letter there?
This one?
Yeah.
This is the cover letter for them.
Where's page 2? You have a clean
On the
copy of that
back of
letter?
Joe's.
Of the letter?
Well, I got Russ's. I can use Russ.
One side is on the appeal and the other side is on Joe's letter.
Good, good. If you don't mind, Attorney Snow, I'm gonna mark your letter Exhibit 4.
Good?
Everybody has a copy of that, John?
Yeah, I believe so.
Pat?
Okay. Yes. I missed what 2 was, though. Must be Joe's letter.
While I have you up there, Attorney Snow, your letter, Joe Roussel's letter of, July 6th.
What's number 2? Did you get one exhibit number 2 out?
Yeah, I'm just going by the dates for now.
Yeah,
There
talk
is
about
July
what Mark's,
16th.
what,
I have a July 6th, this is Exhibit A.
And then on July 6, 2018, you submitted with your letter, Exhibit A letter from Joe Roussel to David Springer. David, the garage you built on this property cannot be used to process medical marijuana per the town ordinance. You have a right to appeal this decision to the Board of Appeals within 30 days of this notice. I'm gonna scratch Exhibit A and mark it Exhibit 5,
Okay?
for the record.
Oh my God.
And then there's a letter from the code enforcement officer to the Board of Appeals dated July 25th, 2018. Do you have a copy of
I
that?
don't have a copy of that.
Do not have a copy of that. Here. Where's your copy of that, Diane?
I got mine right here.
July 25th?
Yep.
That's a letter to the Board of Appeals from Joe Roussel. I have reviewed David Spring's application for a medical marijuana production facility and denied it because it is not allowed in the district on Route 9. Mr. Springer applied for a garage permit on the lot, and it was okay for the use. Now he wants to put a garage, he wants to put on the garage a bakery for the medical part of his operation.
And that is not correct. He wants another cultivation facility, just like he has in the other 3 buildings.
Right, but I just want to make that part of the record also.
Okay.
Any objections?
No objections.
That'll be Exhibit 5. Where am I at?
6, I think.
6.
I would like to ask her a question now from what she just said.
Go ahead.
Okay, you said you went before the planning board,
Yes.
and they, according to your letter, it says the town's planner had a question. Who is that you spoke with?
We don't know who that was. It was someone sitting in this seat. It wasn't Mr. Roussel. We don't know who it was there that night. Dave and I have talked about that, and we don't know.
Was it a male?
Could it have
It was a
been
male.
Bobby James.
Had to be James
but was it-
Portsmouth.
James,
It
Dave?
wasn't James, he was an
No.
older fellow.
It wasn't
Oh, it was
James.
my, Mark, Harrigan, the code enforcement officer.
He was gone by that time.
Mark was, he got released.
Before that?
Before that,
I
yeah.
don't know who it was.
Yeah, we don't know who it
We
was.
don't know either.
Okay.
Well, would it have been Lee J?
He was a short guy?
I couldn't, he was sitting the whole time. I couldn't tell you.
Could have been EJ, because he was filling in for the, from Southern Maine Planning and Development. So it could have been him.
Okay. Okay. Just curious.
What
You
was,
have to look at the tape, I mean.
I've lost the question now. What was the question?
I wanted to know, she said they went before the planning board. And what did you go before the planning board for?
Well, we went for this issue, and the planning board said, we are not the ones to address this. We are going to deny this. We're not the ones to address it. You need to take it to the appeals board.
And what's the time frame on that?
Oh, the permit.
We went before the planning board on July
This year?
of this year. Yeah, it was roughly
5.
6 weeks
Then
ago.
the
It was,
second meeting in July, because I don't have the first one.
Okay. Anything else, Pat?
No. that's fine.
Anything else? Anything at this time?
not from me.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
Basically, like I said, you've gotten all the packets there back in December 14th, 2016, David come into the office, inquire about medical marijuana operations. And again, back then, we allowed it under agriculture. He had planned on 3 buildings right up front. And so we started the process under agriculture. So as time went on, for all the permits that he was getting, you know, the town was looking into defining medical marijuana and processing and everything else. And so, again, they decided to come up with marijuana production using the oils, you know, byproducts of it and stuff like that, and decided that, you know, that was gonna be best for the town and stuff like that, so.
Who decided that? Sorry, I mixed up the,
The
I just,
planning board
fine, okay.
has to review the ordinances, and then it goes to the selectmen.
Okay,
and
that's,
then
yeah,
it gets
gotcha.
approved through the residents when they approve it.
Mhm.
The unfortunate part was that they didn't include Route 9 when there was already a production facility going on, which, for whatever reason, I didn't even realize it at the time with the wording and stuff like that. But they only put it in the RCI zone, which is some parts of 236 and Route 4. So, again, didn't even think of it at the time, stuff like that. David come in, and again, the dates, I don't have it all in order at the time, but, he wanted to put in a bakery for the medical marijuana part. Correct?
That's correct, yes, processing.
Process. And so, geez, you know, bakeries are listed under low-impact development, which was something that was new that they brought into the ordinances and stuff like that also. So bakery is a bakery. But again, they define medical marijuana as the producing of any parts of the plants and byproducts as medical marijuana, and it can only be allowed in the RCI zone. So then, obviously, we talked with the town manager, we talked, you know, back and forth on what we could do and stuff like that, and basically it came down to that if it doesn't fly, we can't change it. So that's why I issued the letter stating at this time it's fine. And
got your July 6th letter
Correct.
of this year.
Correct. To get him to this meeting.
This discussion that you're referring to about the bakery and so forth, is that before the ordinance was amended or after?
So,
This discussion you had with Mr. Springer, when he was talking about the bakery and so forth, is that before the ordinance was amended or after?
It was in place at that time.
The ordinance was in
So we
place.
looked at possibly doing the bakery aspect under low impact development. And then, under the way it's defined,
Do you have any recollection of any discussion with Mr. Springer prior to the ordinance being amended concerning that fourth building?
no, because we were under agriculture and stuff like that. And again, when they were redoing the, putting in the wording for medical marijuana and where it's gonna be processed and all this stuff, didn't expect it not to be on Route 9, where there was already a business there.
So are you suggesting it was an oversight by the people who proposed the amendment to the ordinance?
I don't know, because I.
Are you suggesting that?
I'm suggesting that, but I don't know if that was the reason behind it.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense, obviously, that you got a Route 9, you got a commercial zone up there with a commercial development, and then you turn around and that's in an R3 zone. How do you get a commercial development in an R3 zone? But they did. And then you got all these other businesses on that road. It's like, why didn't they make that RC zone in that area? I don't know. That's
Is that in the mill now?
in the works.
Yes.
I heard it was, but I haven't seen the paperwork.
Okay.
I mean, because I'm only just filling in to try to keep permits and some inspections going and stuff like that, so I don't know what the wording is today. But I did hear it was supposed to be changing.
I have a question on,
Guaranteed.
I have a question on your December 6th letter. I mean, December 14, 2016, Exhibit 3.
Yep,
The phrase that caught my eye is, "This would be permitted at this time." Any particular reason you put that in there?
only because they were talking about starting to regulate medical marijuana.
When did they pass the grow and sell part of that law? Was it November 16?
November 7th.
Something like that.
According to the timeline, November 7th, right?
When the town passed it?
No, the state.
Oh, the state passed it in 19, the latest version was, I believe, 2009
Nine.
for
That-
medical
that-
marijuana. There's, yeah,
That's
it
more
was originally
restrictive,
passed
is
in
it not?
1999. They put more regulations on it in 2009. And they just recently, the legislature has passed a new medical marijuana bill that changes things quite a bit in favor of actually the growers. But the one that was in effect was the one that had been in effect for
2009.
And
since
at that point,
2009.
they didn't have a definition for medical marijuana. It went
Yeah.
under agriculture.
I mean, were you anticipating something when you put that phrase in there?
Because most towns were talking about, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna start regulating this stuff, or are we gonna let it go, let the state worry about it, or whatever? A lot of towns ended up just putting moratoriums in to hold off and see what the states were gonna do. But it was just a phrase that I did based on it's agriculture, and if that changed, it would be at that time we'd have to worry.
Okay. Do you have any questions from Joe?
No, I think you pretty much answered.
Nat?
Yep. According to the timeline, in January of 2018, when Mr. Springer went to get the fourth building permit, you would not issue him the permit, and in February, you would issue him the permit. So why did you change your mind?
The February one was based on, it was gonna go under, bakery, under low impact development.
So you, Okay, but the fourth permit says.
What's the date on that permit?
February 21st. It says construct a 40 by 80 garage
Correct.
facility.
That's, yeah,
So, like a garage,
yeah.
but a bakery?
One part of it was gonna be the bakery, the other part was gonna be a storage garage.
So this was not going to be the medical marijuana growing facility plant like the other ones. This was going to be a storage facility and a bakery.
That's what the discussion was, yes.
And now, do I understand that this is planning to be used for medical marijuana cultivation? This building?
Yes, and can I make a comment on that, or do you want me to wait?
I think we're trying to talk, so.
Okay,
Go ahead.
okay, so if I can, and Mr. Roussel, tell me if I have this wrong, but my understanding is that Mr. Springer started on this building, like he said, he started the grading and so on this building in October of last year. Mr. Roussel came out because Dave was trying to get an occupancy permit for Building 3, correct? So Mr. Roussel came out, he had already started some of the work on Building 4.
Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
In October.
yes, because
Nope,
I give a.
that's fine.
Yep, yes.
So he had started the building, and then this new ordinance came into
Right.
effect that Mr. Springer wasn't aware of. So Mr. Springer kept working. Got to be January, and Mr. Roussel told Dave, oh, wait a second, this medical marijuana production facilities aren't allowed on Route 9 anymore. My understanding is that the conversations were more about, it wasn't that Dave said, oh, well, I wanted to do a bakery, or I wanted to do processing, making oils and such. It was more various conversations over the course of the next few months of, well, okay, would a bakery fit, being that they changed it? Would a production, making oils and so on, would that fit under the way the code now is now? Is that correct? Okay, so it was more of an evolve. It wasn't that he was saying, I now want to do this. It was more of an evolving. Once in January, he learned that the cultivation facility wasn't going to be allowed under the new ordinance.
Particularly on the fourth building, not on the other three.
Right. He already had the occupancy permits for the other 3 buildings. This was just for the 4th building.
And that's, like I said, under low-impact development, bakeries are allowed. But based on the definition of the processing of medical marijuana, that nixed it out.
As far as
At first, I didn't think it would. But the way that it's defined, is what it says.
If you, for example, on supposition only, if you, for example, started processing marijuana to use the cannabinoid oils to make dog biscuits, and you were going to bake them for purposes of not starting a drugstore, not being an apothecary, but just you're a baker who's baking with products of marijuana, right?
And what would be in this bakery? For, you know, what would the bakery be? Would it be a home oven? Or is it a commercial?
If it were a bakery, under state law, it would have to have a commercial kitchen license from the state. And the laws changed a bit. Well, it is about to change. At the time that this was all taking place, only someone with a medical marijuana caregiver's license from the state would be able to use marijuana in baked goods.
Because you're becoming like a manufacturer.
It's like a manufacturer, but at the time, the state law didn't include separate manufacturing. So the caregivers with the license would have to do it. So that's what would have been happening in this facility. The new law that will take effect sometime this fall actually has a separate manufacturing license for people who are going to either distill or extract oil or are going to be baking using medical marijuana. So it's going to be a little bit different. But at the time, there was no manufacturing license. It was under a caregiver state-issued license.
According to the permit, this garage,
Which permit are you referring to?
the permit that we're still talking about on February 21st for the fourth building, from what I can see, it was a garage facility. It was not going to be for growing or, you know, it's a garage facility, which would be like an accessory use. Is that right,
Well,
Joe? It would be an
no, that-
accessory use?
Excuse me a minute, let me address that, okay?
Okay, yep,
You're focusing on the fourth permit, which
Yep.
just says garage facility. If you go back and look at the first permit,
yep,
it says building in March of 2017, it says building agriculture. The April 27th permit, wooden commercial structure.
yep,
The May 4th just says building. And the one you're referring to are keying in on says garage facility. None of them say anything about medical marijuana. So that's a question I have for you. Is that, I mean, when he comes in there and says building agriculture, what the hell is that, excuse me, what does that mean?
Like I said, when we first started this process, that first permit, we based it on agriculture, so that started.
But you didn't define agriculture. What agricultural use do we,
Growing of plants.
well, doesn't say that on
I
here.
know, but you look at the definition in the ordinance, agriculture is the growing of plants.
Okay,
And so that, as a medical marijuana facility, it's growing of plants.
all right. But he did discuss with you in that March 9th permit that I'm gonna be growing marijuana for medical purposes.
On which one?
The March 9th, 2000, the first one,
The first one?
yeah.
Yes.
And then on the second one, in April of 27th, wooden commercial structure with 3 individual units. Nothing about agriculture on that one, or medical marijuana.
Right, and when he first came in, he told me right up front, they were gonna have 3 buildings. And it shows it on one of the, permits where the 3 buildings were gonna be set.
we do not have that.
Hang on a minute, Pat.
Yeah, for the first 3 buildings?
But again, on that April one, nothing about agriculture or medical marijuana.
Because it was all part of the first permit. That's what he was doing. When the first permit came in, that's what he talked about.
All right. And the same then on the May 4th one, right?
May 4th.
Wanna have a seat, please?
This is on 5/3/17. I had him put down where the 3 buildings were. This is Route 9 going, no, this is actually what it is, Route 9 going in here.
And that was the permit for May?
Yeah,
So that's why the third one ends up in the back.
correct.
Okay.
Can may I see that,
Fourth one.
please?
Yeah. And just right here,
This is Route 9?
yeah.
Okay. 2.
And this one was actually turned this way. There's one here, here, here.
Okay,
And then the 4th one's over here.
okay. But there was a plan for 3 buildings then?
Correct.
Not the 4th building?
Not at that time, no.
Right, okay. And which plan was that? That was the very
Five.
first.
That was 5,
May 17.
3/17.
5, 3/17.
Goes back into 3 buildings, right?
So included
The 3 buildings, right?
Right.
picture with 3 buildings.
This one is specific to the fourth one.
But nothing, none of it. I'm gonna have all these things put in as exhibits.
That will, I mean, whatever we do, that will definitely help James or whoever has to type it up, but I don't know.
Attorney Snow, I have a packet of the permits, the March 9th one, the occupancy for that first permit, the occupancy permit. I have the permit for April 27th and the accompanying occupancy permit in August. I have the March 4th permit and the occupation permit on the 21st of November, and the permit dated February 21. For the record, I would like to make that packet Exhibit 7 for the record.
Okay.
Any objections, board?
No.
Any more questions, Pat?
Yep. On the permit for the 4th building, I think it's the only permit that you have erosion control checked as being something you have to check out. Has that been checked out? And has any of it been checked out yet, Joe? You know, because there are no dates or anything on this like on the other ones. You know, as the progress is moving along. For example, on the building number 1 permit, it was signed on 3/9, but then, you know, you can tell, you must have gone out to the site in March, and then you went out again in May.
I don't have that permit in front of me to look at.
Okay, but, you know, you must have been out visiting, you know, to see how the progress was going, that kind of thing. So the one,
As of April 1st of this year,
uh-huh,
I was done. So whatever happened after April 1st,
okay, so we don't know how the required inspections are,
I wasn't full-time at that time.
okay. And of course, I would also be asking, because this building is 55 feet from the property line, and I would be asking that, you know, that would be checked out to make sure that didn't go past the 50
That has,
mark.
Mark has been out there for that, all the groundwork part of it, and the erosion. That has been checked off. He has been out there. How's that?
Okay, so we don't have any records of that, though?
I don't either. I don't need records for that.
Okay.
Are some of these buildings heated, or will they be heated? Has the chief of the fire department done an
Oh, yeah.
inspection
Has
for the
fire alarm
furnaces?
system, each one of them.
Okay. And is your road the required width? Okay.
And they've all been inspected by the fire chief.
And just to get a picture about how much progress has been made on the 4th one, have you got
Well,
footings and?
What happened was, it all started in January with the permit application, which I got denied right off the bat. Okay, so then me and Joey and Mark, the new inspector, code inspector, were working probably, it took maybe a month, pretty close to a month of going back and forth. What are we gonna do? What can I do? You know, trying to explain, Joey understood, but Mark had a hard time understanding that this facility just can't be anything. I can't have you know, a garage in there, for example. It's a secure facility. You know, people are in there that are only the people that are supposed to be in there. But anyhow, on that note, we went back and forth on what can I do with this location to make this work. I can't do cultivation with processing work. And that's when me and Joe and Mark went back and forth for probably a few weeks, come to the conclusion that processing would be allowed. I mean, I made it clear that I wouldn't want to start this if it wasn't allowed. This is not going to be a problem. Now, me and Joey go back a long time. I trust Joey. And Joey's understanding was, yes, I could do processing. So, for a fast, to get this thing rolling, because I've been, you know, losing time, I wanted to just pull a permit for the structure itself, just for the building itself. And that's what you see in front of you. It is just a garage. But the garage is going to be converted into a processing center, which would be very easy. It takes the enclosures, labs, explosion-proof labs. That's why we had overhead doors to slide an explosion-proof facility into it. It's like a vault. So anyhow, that was the understanding. Now, as all the permits, the foundation, the building was starting, now I'm coming in to make sure the usage so I could lease out my units. And that's when I was denied the usage. Now, I already have a building now there that now I can't do anything with, after being told that I could. You know, I was working with the town all this time, which Joey will, you know, will agree to.
Are you able to use the first 3 buildings for growing and cultivating marijuana? And because it's supposed to be, it's required to be indoors now under the new laws.
Yeah, they're
Are you able to use them now, or you're going to be
they're
able to
grandfathered.
use them?
I'm not being prevented from,
Okay.
you know, kicking my tenants.
So the use of the 4th one is the bone of contention.
That
Could it
was
be
our
used
problem.
as a drying room only? Would that be a practical solution?
Right now, for all
Or you don't
yeah,
need a
for all
drying?
practical use, I mean, it should be a cultivation. And the issue that I have right now is I had tenants for a processing, and I don't have tenants now. I mean, we're talking from February to, here we are going into September pretty soon. No one's gonna stick around for me, you know? So I got an empty building there that I have no usage for. And cultivation would be the easiest, yes.
And that's what's going on in the other 3 buildings.
That's correct, yes.
You rent these out to,
Yeah,
you're
individual.
not operating these buildings.
No, I'm just the landlord, the owner of the facility.
So to me, your permit is for a garage facility,
That's correct.
and I guess that would fall under an accessory use in the table, in our use table, on page 37. And so, yeah. So under, is it under miscellaneous, sorry, 37, there it is. So nothing, we don't have garage as a choice, but we do have structures accessory to the allowed use. It's probably 5 or 6 up from the bottom on page 37. And then if you look at the definition of an accessory structure, where is it? Page 2. The accessory use or structure, it says, a use or structure which is customarily incidental to the principal use or structure. term incidental in reference to the principal use or structure shall mean subordinate and minor insignificance to the principal use or structure. Accessory use, well, that doesn't apply, the rest of it. To me, like, you know, a garage would be an accessory, but another processing plant is not an accessory use to the rest of the things. Is that?
That's correct, and as Mr. Roussel has said, they originally had the permit as a garage, knowing that what he was going to be doing, but because trying to figure this whole thing out, it was never intended to be simply a garage, simply an accessory use, and everyone was aware of that. That's how the permit was written, but everyone was aware what this building was intended to do. Is that correct?
But it wasn't intended for cultivation, it was intended for a bakery or?
Originally, it was intended for cultivation and potentially for making extractions, oils, and that sort of thing. Like I said before, once Mr. Roussel figured out zoning has changed and cultivation isn't allowed here, they started discussing other options that might be allowed there.
Mm-hmm.
So this was an ongoing discussion about that. I believe Mr. Roussel was more or less led by you saying, okay, I've given you permit to build this garage. We both know what you had planned here, but now the town has changed things on us after you had already started. And what can we do here to try to get you into this? It wasn't like he only, I'll tell you, I work completely solely with people in the cannabis business, making sure they're legal, making sure they're compliant, and so on. I have people who call me and say, the town has put a quit work order on my building because I applied that I was building a garage, and now they've seen that I have electricity and water coming in, and now they put a stop work order on. And I say to them, did you tell them from the beginning what you were doing? And they say, no. That's a mess, and I hate having to get into that. And I tell my clients, be transparent. Dave has been transparent through this entire process. This was not Dave calling me and saying, oops, I didn't tell him what I was doing, and now I got to figure this out. He has been compliant as far as he knew to be compliant, and working with Mr. Roussel to be compliant throughout this entire process. And with the change, all of a sudden there was this, oh no, you can't do this, although he didn't know until January that the change had happened. And then it was the two of them saying, okay, what can we do here?
So, when the town amended the ordinance, that made that a non-conforming use?
Yes, it did. That's the whole issue right here, right there. He had already started, he had already been talking with code enforcement. On November 7th, the town changed the ordinance.
If you had pulled a permit before that, we wouldn't be here.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Understandably, yes.
Do you have any recollection of having discussion with him before the ordinance was passed, Joe, about that building gonna be a cultivation building? Do you have any recollection?
No.
I believe, though, you said earlier that in October, you did talk about it when you were out for the occupancy permit for Building 3, that you did talk about it at that time because he was starting the grading work.
Yes.
We
on
talked
that.
about, me, you and Kim.
You know, about they were gonna do the fourth building. And like you said, they were in the works of doing more zoning regulations. But I never gave it a thought that they were gonna leave out
Route 9.
Route 9. I mean, which didn't make any sense based on the fact that there was already an operation there.
And in that October sequence, or timeframe, your understanding that this building was gonna be a similar use to, like the other three?
Yes.
So when you did the permit in February 21st, you gave it to them knowing they were going to grow in it?
No, he wanted to get the building up.
Mhm. So it
He
was
said
just,
the same thing.
uh-huh,
He
it was
wanted to
just
get
the building.
up.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then
Yep.
that's when everything else come down and,
Right.
yeah, geez, we can't do this. What
Yep.
can we do with this building? Because
Well, yep,
May I ask a question?
yeah.
I'm just a little, your July 25th, Joe, letter says, "I have reviewed David Springer's application for a medical marijuana production facility." What application are you, are you, are
the
you,
whole-
are
the
you, are you,
parcel.
are you,
I'm basically talking about the parcel, you know, because it's a medical marijuana production facility.
so there's not a specific application that you're,
No, that's his,
and you're not,
his
ref-
lot, right.
and you're not referring to the February 21st permit, you're
No.
just to the overall operation.
What happened was that we went to the planning board. The planning board said you need to go to the appeals board and you need a letter. I called and I believe I talked to James, and he said you need a letter from the code enforcement officer just documenting that he's denying the permit, just so that you can go to the appeals board. And you and I talked.
Right.
Right, yeah, and Mr. Russell said, yeah, I'll put together this letter as basically a formality so that we can be here tonight.
You have to have something denied.
I understand.
Yeah.
We're gonna hear from the abutters as well. I don't think we're gonna be,
I have one question. When he applied to do this there originally through the planning board, they knew, in other words, did he at that time have to say how many buildings he was gonna have there?
Planning
or-
board?
Is that where he had to go to get,
When he
or was
first
it through,
started?
yeah,
First started, it was agriculture, didn't have to go in front of the planning board.
okay, so,
Agriculture was allowed in all districts.
yeah, so he didn't have to say how many buildings he was gonna put in at that time.
Did he indicate to you multiple buildings?
He had talked about 3, right up front.
Yeah,
You know, that's
okay.
what he was talking.
Is there some kind of a, I'm just curious about this, you know, the size of these buildings? Did he have to get a permit for the size of the building at all?
Did one at a time, he didn't have, you know, he got permits to build them, but that's about it.
Uh-huh,
by percentage of area covered, there's no question about
Plenty
how
of-
big,
he's got
how
plenty
many.
of acreage.
Right.
Yeah.
He's just not
Right,
all
right.
over
I
the
figured that out.
Percentage for lot
Yeah.
coverage. He didn't hit that, even with the Ford building.
okay.
He hasn't hit it.
Can we hear from the abutters? Can we,
Sorry.
can we hear from abutters, but can we
Yes.
keep going back and asking questions too?
Are you done with Attorney Snow, and are you done with with Joe Russell at this point?
I think so.
So, John?
I don't know if can we get a definition of what the use will be? Because I don't believe that, it sounds like the code enforcement officer, Joe Russell, did not deny it on the basis of the. Oh, is it my microphone? I wonder if we could get a definition or a plan of, a stated plan of what the use will be. If it's to be more of a manufacturing facility, or is it a medical marijuana facility, more in line with growing and processing, not in line with, I mean, you're not gonna start a small pharmaceutical company without a lot of permitting and certification,
No.
that kind of thing. So
Certainly
which
we can-
direction are we going in, I guess?
Well,
is-
certainly we can do that. Under Berwick's ordinance, medical marijuana ordinance, the ordinance only uses the term medical marijuana production facility. And under that, it includes cultivation, it includes manufacturing, which includes baking. So all of that
Use
is
of the
under,
oils,
that's the way that it's defined in the ordinance. So according to the ordinance, it doesn't really matter which of those he's doing there. I mean, certainly we can put together a plan of what he wants to do, but it's all the same under the ordinance.
Well, the ordinance also includes the idea of a dispensary and medical marijuana provided to just
That-
patients, specific patients, and
A dispensary is a separate thing. So, under Maine state
And
law.
we know it's not retail.
Well, and that's completely, that's a whole other separate thing.
Right.
So, under Maine medical marijuana law, put recreational retail aside, because it's completely different. Under Maine medical marijuana law, there are 2 licenses for growing and selling medical marijuana. One is a dispensary license, and that's a very specific term, dispensary, in Maine. It's not in other states, but in Maine it is. There are only 8 dispensary licenses that have been issued in the entire state. It's limited to 8. They're nonprofit.
Dispensary means sell.
No. Dispensary is its own discrete thing.
Okay.
So dispensaries, there are only 8 licenses. They have to be nonprofits. The dispensaries are allowed to essentially grow as much as they want and sell to as many people as they want. They can do their own manufacturing and so on. So they're big businesses. These dispensaries are big businesses, and they're very limited. Most of the 8, in fact, it may be all of the 8 dispensary licenses are out-of-staters, out-of-state big companies who have those licenses. That's a dispensary. It's a very discrete thing under Maine law. Then there are caregiver licenses, which is what we're talking about here. Caregiver licenses, there's no limit to the number of caregiver licenses that the state can issue, but caregivers are limited in the number of plants they can grow. The caregiver law is changing some in the fall, but right now they're limited to having 5 patients at any one time. They're limited in how much they can sell to a patient. That right now they can only have 1 employee, although that's going to change. Essentially, if you look at it, dispensaries are big, heavily regulated industries that are just about like the retail, except they can only sell to patients. Caregivers, which is completely different, not dispensaries, caregivers are small business people who service their patients. Often they're more boutique-ish. So when something in a law, whether it's an ordinance or state law, says dispensary, that's talking about these 8 big licensees. If it doesn't say dispensary, then that's where the caregivers fall in. Does that clear it up? Because I know it's very confusing.
Right, but this is a medical marijuana production facility, right?
Yes.
So we're not going to be, you're not going to be using the marijuana to concentrate the oils and create bottles of oil to be sold retail, or bottles of oil to be used in some other treatment. You're going to be, that's essentially my question. By medical marijuana production facility, what's the scope of that? How far, what's the capacity of all 4 buildings? Would the 4th building be needed to complete that plan? Because I just got, which direction are you going in?
Okay, so the way that this works is that under Berwick's ordinance, a medical marijuana production facility can include cultivation. It can also include making the oils, the extracts from the raw plant. Both are included. Then those have to be sold through a licensed caregiver. So what Dave has is, in the 3 buildings he has right now, he leases those to caregivers. Under Maine state law, those caregivers' cultivation areas, their grows, have to be segregated and partitioned off. They can't grow together. So there has to be a locked door and some kind of wall or something that people can't get through to help each other. So they're completely separate as caregivers. Each caregiver is limited to growing 30 flowering plants and 60 non-flowering plants. That's the most that they can grow. So your buildings have how many rooms?
There's 3 units per building.
Okay, so each building has 3 separate caregivers in it who lease their space from Dave. They're all operating independently as caregivers licensed by the state. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so the fourth, and it sounded before like the fourth building is going to continue in that vein, or is it something separate?
Well, it will continue as a medical marijuana production facility. As Dave said, he can grow in it. He actually, and in discussions all through, he was considering using it also as a medical marijuana production facilities to extract the oils and that sort of thing, which he would do for caregivers. And there's a manufacturing license that the state is about to start issuing that will allow people to actually license to do that. But under the Berwick ordinance, both of those fall under a medical marijuana production facility. And he was never asked to completely specify which it was going to be. He was just trying to figure out what he could do there, that he could do under the town ordinances.
So according to the town's ordinance that has just passed, he is not allowed to grow in that building,
Correct.
but he could have the oils
No.
and the, no,
According to the
nothing.
As
ordinance
part of
that
the
passed, he
production, so-
cannot have a medical marijuana production facility.
He can have none of the things in
None
there.
of those things according to that ordinance that passed.
Can you show us on that, on your, I was thinking about this map that you gave us, and it doesn't have any of the buildings on it. I mean, it has the proposed building, but it doesn't have your other buildings on it. And I was kind of curious if you could show us the placement of the buildings.
You want me to come over and just kind of put it?
I guess because I'm interested in knowing your fencing and all your
Yeah.
stuff. So if you can, and I know you have your
Here we
other
go.
picture, but
Absolutely. What we have right
all right, this
here.
is Route 9, I think,
I'm
isn't
trying
it?
to figure, no, I think that's Route 9.
That's Route 9.
Yeah.
Okay, there you
So
go.
we're driving in. Right here's building 4. This
In
is where-
relation to this
to this
building,
one here,
is
correct,
that
that's-
size?
Well, it's it's an 80-foot
It's
building.
bigger.
It's quite a bit smaller than
Oh,
these are.
smaller
These
than-
are 150 feet long. That's an 80-foot building.
Any of these help show it? These are pictures
So, yeah, there's a driveway.
Which one is this one?
There's a driveway right here
Mhm.
going in to the facility, somewhere like right here, that drives in with power. There's a pole here. Yeah, that's pretty much where you got this, your electrical. But anyways, that's pretty much where the building's located.
Oh, okay, but I want to
Okay.
know where the other buildings are.
Well, then you got.
And
this
if you
has
can
changed
make them
quite
a
bit.
kind of the right size.
Yeah, well,
Because your
that-
proposed building is here. This is the
this-
one we're talking about
that's
now, right?
number 1 we started.
Oh, that's
Okay,
number
yeah,
one.
so
That's
that's the
not number
first-
4.
No, this is number 4, and then we also have one right here. And see, this is the 3rd building, this is 3. And this is where Joey and I spoke about either putting a building right here, a proposed building here, or here. And I couldn't put a larger building down there because I didn't have the setbacks, but that's how we started this one.
All right,
being
so
small.
which is number 1? Which
This is 4, this is 1.
That's the newest one in the corner.
Yeah, that's the one I'm having
Does that have a steep grade or anything, or
no,
it's pretty flat?
that's, yeah,
Okay?
Okay.
yes.
All right, thanks. Do you guys want to see that? The reason why I'm asking is I'm wondering if he can change his fencing and exclude that building.
Yeah, but that's still-
You know, if it's not allowed.
Oh,
So
s-
I wondered if it was sticking, out to
Oh,
the
I see what
side
you
and,
mean. Mhm.
You know,
Any further
That could
questions
still
for-
suit the purpose.
what's that?
for Attorney
that could
Stoll
still
or
suit the
Joe
purpose.
Before we go to the abutters?
Yeah, I'm all set for the abutters.
I can't think of anything right now.
I'm all set.
All right, we finished this phase, but are there any abutters here that would like to address us? Would you come to the microphone, ma'am, and state your name, please?
Rob
Robin Rainville, 407 School Street.
Robin Randall,
Rainville,
Rainville,
yes.
R-A-I, N-V-I-L-L-E.
V as in Victor, I-L-L-E.
Can you pull the mic down a little bit, maybe?
Sure.
Or-
Is that good?
No, it doesn't change it.
You're at
Hello? Check, check.
407 Route 9.
Testing. 407 School Street, yes, Route 9.
Thank you, go ahead.
Not exactly sure why I was invited here, but I don't know anything about this fourth building. All I know is since the manufacturing facility is started and they've been working, it smells really bad in the neighborhood. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that nobody, like, I don't know if the abutters were invited to any meetings previously about this marijuana facility going in. I know I wasn't. I know none of my neighbors were. And I would have had a concern right off the bat with our property values going down if we decide to sell. I'm sure of that, especially if my home is being shown when that stench is out in the air. And it is really bad to the point where you can't enjoy being in your yard. I've had to go in because it's just so nasty, I can't be out there. Driving by it, it's disgusting. People have asked, what's that smell? And at first, I didn't realize. I thought, you know, somebody in the neighborhood was smoking a little bit of pot, so what? But then after a while, it got worse and worse and worse, and it just smells like a skunk all the time. Whenever, I don't know if it's at a certain point in the production or what it is, but I think that's a major concern that needs to be addressed because, you know, we pay taxes too, obviously, and I want to be able to enjoy my time outside of my house, in my yard. And I know it's affecting many of the neighbors. People have called for months. I went to Mark specifically at the time, and I was really upset that day in particular because it was really bad. So I feel like I'm just getting the idea just from listening to you guys in this meeting that it was never really specifically said on paper, this is going to be a medical marijuana facility. That's what I'm getting. Maybe I'm wrong. It sounds like maybe you knew, and of course you guys knew what was going to happen with it. So that's my big concern there. I had something else too, and I can't think of what it is. The other thing that makes me concerned is the fact that it's a landlord-tenant situation, which I also didn't realize. And that makes me concerned as to how much control, how well it's being overseen as to what's really going on. Meaning, I don't know, that just makes me, I actually was under the impression that you were actually there, you know, working it. I didn't realize it was a landlord-tenant situation, which has me concerned too. So that's all I have to say, and I'm voting that we don't go forward and don't allow it anymore. I know that's not a vote, but that's my vote, so, thank you.
Hi, my name's Lorraine Hughes. I live on Route 9, 404 School Street. And I'm also wanting to complain about the smell. They're supposed to have filters in those marijuana places, I was told. And I can't even sit in my backyard, and I am a butter. And then when I sit outside, I smell that all the time. Okay, I have called the code enforcement about 3 times, and he told me to continue calling. And the third time I said, well, what good is it, because you're not doing anything about it. And the other thing is, it is very close to 2 schools. We got 2 schools up here. We got a middle school, we got a junior high school, and this is very close to the schools. It's not far from the middle school. I'm hoping you are taking that into consideration. And if they start to sell this, putting in a garage to sell this stuff, can you imagine how many people are going to be in and out of that? And what it's going to do to Route 9? And to the schools, where the schools are so close? And Mr. Springer says that there's a fence all the way around, and I'm sorry to tell him that he is wrong, because I went into my backyard and there is no fence. I don't see any fence at all. And I've walked up my woods up to Mr. Wheat's house place, and because he's a butter, And I don't see any fence around there. I can just walk in that place if I wanted to. And this is what I have to say. And I don't agree with the garage being there to be sold marijuana. I didn't agree with building this to begin with, but I was overvoted, obviously. But I don't agree with it. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Mike Wheat. I live at 408 School Street.
Mike,
Wheat, W-H-E-A-T.
thank you.
I was going to bring up the fact that it does have a beautiful gate, but no fence. You can walk right around it, be on the property. And when they do, they'll be coming through my property. There's a road in the back for the commercial drive. Very easy to get in there and walk through the woods to get on the property. It's lit up like a shopping mall at night, and it stinks. It does smell badly. And I've had issues with these trucks going in and out using the Jake brake. They all say it's to save brakes. That's wrong. Jake brakes are for on hills. So he's bringing in and out. He must have brought out hundreds of yards of fill because he brought the whole hill down to level. And that broke the windbreak. It's open now, and it blows westerly winds right towards all the houses. It's all you can smell is skunk. It's horrible. Transparency was transparent. It wouldn't go from a commercial wooden building to a garage. 110-foot building's a heck of a garage. It's a big garage. It's playing with the words. It's playing with it. He's trying to, he wants to get it in. He got the building up. Let's get the building up, then we'll get the permit, because then, we'll be that much closer to getting it. I think it's all a bunch of deception. And anymore, when they start doing production, the oils and stuff, all that waste that's out there, it's going to be caused by that. It's just going to be a nightmare for people living there. There's a lot of houses around there. A lot of people keep talking about commercial businesses up there. They all came after. We all lived there before them. There's a lot of abutters I know that didn't get letters for this meeting. But I talked to one or two that said they would have planned to be here if they had known. They would have complained about the smell and the lights and the noise.
Lights up my backyard.
Maybe it's like a shopping mall up there. I guess you need that when you don't have a fence. I understand there's big money to be made in this, big money. Who are these tenants? Where do they come from? How many? You got 3 in each, that's what, 9 tenants he has now? Who are they? Is it all clean money? Who is it, really? How do we know? Production oils? Just the heath runs into behind there. The hill's gone, so now you see the iron in the water. It has the rainbow, the sheen. That's from the iron in the ground. What about the oils? How do we know? EPA doesn't control, I don't think, hemp oil. Who controls it? The town gonna? The town gonna inspect them? There's a lot of code, a lot of things that go beyond the code that need to be looked at. Thank you.
Any other abutters?
Just, Alan Rainville, 407 School Street. I was just wondering about the groundwater impact, what that has. I have no idea on, because I thought that maybe my groundwater was a little bit lower this year than it's ever been. So I don't know if it would have something to do with it. I'm not up on that sort of information. But that's one concern that I have, and the stink is really bad. We don't like to smell that. People get out of their vehicles to come visit, and the first thing they do is they start looking at the greenhouse that I built for my wife, and so it's pretty strong. It's pretty strong. We don't prefer that smell in our yard as well. So I'm concerned with the groundwater. What sort of an impact does that have? You know? What do they use? Big artesian wells? Yeah. Because my water level, I actually watch it quite closely, and it was down really early in the season.
Well, we had a dry summer too.
Right.
But
No,
when
I said early in the season.
Well, the thing
Early in
is
the
that
season.
They don't require water.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't keep real strong records of it. But. And, you know, and if you start getting into selling retail, there was never a permit for any of that. That was never discussed in the beginning, right? It was just growing. If we start having retail in our backyard, we're going to have all kinds of people in and out of there. You know, they're going to be burning rubber and, pardon the term potheads, but they're going to be all over.
I don't think retail is an issue, sir. Correct? But at least for what we're dealing with here this evening.
Yeah. So that's our big concern, you know. Like Mike said, you know, we were there before this came about, and it's not anything that we're really looking forward to. I don't think any of us. I know that when they cut the trees, I mean, they went right up to the boundary lines. They cut every tree right up, and kind of inconsiderate. You know, I mean, you just cleared out all that property. It would have been good to at least consider the people that are existing there. And I do know one fella that's pretty upset about that. His backyard's kind of ruined. He doesn't even go out and sit in his backyard anymore because he smells the pot and gets to look at those beautiful buildings with those nice shiny roofs and spotlights and so forth. That's what we gotta say about it.
Thank you.
May I just want to say one more thing? Thank you. I'll make it quick, I'm sorry. I feel like from just being at this one meeting and hearing everything that I've heard that everybody has said, that I don't believe that the town had any clue about, and that's not any kind of an insult whatsoever, what the impact of a medical marijuana facility would have on the town at all. If there was going to be any impact, I don't think we had enough education, the town had enough education to okay a medical marijuana facility, just based on what I'm hearing tonight. And again, this is not an insult at all to the town. Just, I think there's a lot more to it and all the laws and such that the attorney's talking about. I think it should have been thought through a lot, you know, before somebody gave them the go-ahead to do it, not understanding how it's going to affect people living nearby. And as my husband said, maybe the groundwater, everything, even the business part of the whole thing. It sounds like it's way bigger than what anybody realized and the impact it's going to have on everybody. That's all. Thank you.
I didn't think about this much. I didn't really know I was coming here till a couple hours ago. But don't the state, is there any state or national laws or state laws supersede the town laws?
Can Joe answer any of these questions?
Not that I'm aware of, but I don't think
Medical-
that's,
I mean,
we're here based on the denial of a permit, okay? So that's whether, I don't, and we're being, what's the word I'm looking for? We're being guided or controlled by our own town ordinance, okay? And if it's an issue, then by the general law. Okay? But as far as the specific marijuana laws, all we have is before November 17th, there wasn't any. Okay, and that use got,
So the original plan
under
was
agriculture, it was allowed.
for agriculture, right? So then another building was put in, so maybe, you know, since the laws have changed, maybe it should just be kept for agriculture alone, instead of adding these other things that are becoming, you know, more of an issue, and we're never taken into consideration after the fact.
Right.
You know, so I would say the right thing to do was, you know, a little piece of pie is better than no pie at all. So do what you can and keep it that way. I think we're all pretty concerned about retail though. Once that word retail came up, nobody was happy. You know, we don't need retail.
Okay, I have something I'd just like to share. can tell you guys are really concerned. You're concerned about the odor issue. You're concerned about traffic. You're concerned about all of these things. And I guess my question, and I'm going to aim it at you, Joe, because I don't think any of us know, what is the forum for them to go to express their concerns about this, where it will actually be heard, and you know, and that kind of thing, and I guess I'm a little fuzzy as far as it was the state was it the state rules for yeah, I don't know how why these things just didn't say marijuana on them in the first place. So can you explain that?
Because it went under agriculture. Because there was no
Okay, there was
definition
no
of
need,
medical marijuana
there was
or
no need to
marijuana
say if it
in
was
zoning.
beans or marijuana.
Correct.
Excuse me, ma'am, excuse me. No,
Okay. All right, so that's what I was kind of
Like
wondering.
I said, the towns before didn't have any regulations.
Uh-huh,
Any town around didn't have any regulations
Mhm.
on medical marijuana until it became an issue.
uh-huh,
Now, everybody is on the
Okay.
bandwagon to get it
okay,
regulated and everything else, and that's where we're at.
okay. And I know, like in town,
Retail is not allowed in the state of Maine.
at this point.
It has not been approved yet.
Right.
So retail is out no matter what.
Mhm.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
thank you.
No, it's not been approved yet.
Well, I want to know then how come nobody's told us, the people that live on Route 9, anything about this? Now, I have a neighbor that wanted to do a coffee shop. He could not do that. Now, that would be commercial, wouldn't it? Just like the marijuana
Mhm.
would be, the garage that he wants to have to sell this marijuana?
Correct.
It's the same thing, but he couldn't build his coffee shop. But it's okay for them to do that?
Then-
We're not,
And again,
okay?
when he first started this, it was allowed under agriculture. Now the town has put a ordinance in place to not allow. And there where the coffee shop is where, again, Route 9 is not an RCI zone. You can only do certain things in that zone, and
Oh.
that's it.
So selling marijuana is one of them.
No,
That's
So
not
this
under
is
the
what I'm
permit.
getting at, okay?
Ag-
Do you understand what I'm trying to get at? Any of you guys understand what I'm trying to say here?
Well, I think he's trying to say that
I can empathize
agriculture is
with you.
allowed.
Well, one at a time.
There's a difference
One at
between
a
beans
time.
and corn and so forth than marijuana.
Yes, ma'am. I think what the situation is prior to us enacting an ordinance specifically for medical marijuana in November of last year, it was allowed under our ordinance under the term agriculture, which has a definition of growing plants. Now, we've enacted a section in our ordinance regarding where medical marijuana can go, okay? And it can go on Route 4 and part of Route 236, okay? And there's rumblings that they wanted to include Route 9 and that they may do that this coming November, okay? So,
I hope not, but
well then, but I think, does that help you?
yes.
Okay, so, in other words, there was nothing controlling marijuana before November last year in this community.
Okay, I just wanted to know the difference between, you
Okay.
can't have a coffee shop,
And
but
when
you
he
can have
goes in
this.
for a permit,
And,
there's, like this evening, this hearing, he has to send notice to, is it 200 feet?
250 feet.
200 feet, any
From his
abutter within
property.
250 feet. That's why you folks got letters. Some of your neighbors may not have because they fell outside the 250-foot limit, okay? And then when these permits were issued back in 2017, the only requirement that I'm aware of is that they gotta put the permit posted, okay? No notices go out to anybody when they go in under the agricultural part of that, of our ordinance at that time. They go in and get a permit, there's no public notice that goes out to anywhere except they gotta post a permit, okay?
Okay, but you're saying agriculture, that's like growing beans and corn and,
And growing
And
marijuana
marijuana.
under the, at that
Plant.
time, right.
It's a plan.
okay. Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. I mean, the key issue for me, folks, I'm gonna tell you, is that we have a use, okay? We passed an ordinance that says that's a non-conforming use, okay? He didn't get his permit, the fourth one, before, and now we're in this gray area about, you know, October, November and all that, but I mean, I can look at this pretty clearly and say, it's a non-conforming use, and you can't expand a non-conforming use. You may within an existing structure under some certain conditions, but you can't expand a non-conforming use by putting up another building. That's one issue, and the other issue is the one you raised in your correspondence, is he grandfathered? Anyways.
Are there other abutters?
Anybody else? Ma'am, I cut you off, ma'am.
Me?
Yeah, you wanted to say something?
I think I'm all set.
You sure?
Can I just read something from the, our present ordinance does control, location cannot be within 1,000 foot of a school, can't be close to a drug or alcohol treatment facility, can't be close to a child care facility. This is just information that the abutters may want to hear. It can't be close to other marijuana production facilities. Two other important controls are security, that being the fence and partially the lighting, and odor control is also another control that the marijuana production facility is required to submit a plan for its odor control. And they have a couple of recommendations of what type of odor control they're supposed to use. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay. So just so you know, that information is there in the land use ordinance now. So, granted, more specific controls have to be added in case the processing takes place. So, there's the whole issue of enforcement. If you feel that you need to talk to the town officers and you need to present an argument that you think that the marijuana production facility is not conforming to those, then you need to speak to somebody in town selectman or a health officer or perhaps the code enforcement officer's office. Well, we can't quite take those ideas up right here, not for this.
Right, that's the
But-
trouble. We're only dealing with the permit here. You know, you have to go somewhere else to register.
And the forum
Per
is
se.
the town manager and the board of selectmen, if that's, go to those meetings. Let me ask you a question, Mr. Springer, if I can speak to him directly. Are there any odor controls on these other three buildings?
Yeah, there's been a process, what they're doing is putting charcoal filters in each of the flower rooms, which the tenants are putting, they're supplying that on their own, and there has been a big difference in the smell. And that's been happening now for the past month. There wasn't anything in the
What about
ordinance.
this fourth building gonna have, what did you call them?
They're basically charcoal filters. It's a filter that's installed in each of the flower rooms. That's where the smell is located.
And are all your tenants doing that?
They are working on it right now. And there is, obviously, there is a difference right now. Because that was, you could drive, I'm with them, I understand where they're coming from. You could drive by Route 9, by that facility, and you could smell it on Route 9. That is diminishing big time.
And this fourth building, are you
That will
intending,
have them, yes.
are you intending to follow the ordinance?
Absolutely, I have no choice. But there was no ordinance at the time. There was no
Understand,
smell.
that's the question I'm asking you.
Yes, it will be followed.
Oh, and I don't really know if we can be mentioning it here, but you know, the,
Well, I think if we, go ahead, go ahead.
well, I'm just saying that the fencing, the security seems to be an issue.
No, there's no issue there. We have cameras throughout the whole facility.
I'm sorry, what?
There's cameras.
No,
throughout
no,
the
I
whole
meant the
facility.
fencing.
There's to keep people out, only the right people, only people that
No, no,
belong.
But some people are saying that there isn't fencing.
There isn't. There isn't fencing.
There
It's
isn't
not
fencing
required.
all the way around the whole
That's not-
place.
That's not required.
That's,
No,
Okay.
no, there's a gate with fence at the front
oh,
entrance.
okay.
Yeah, that's a misprint.
Sir, you said you had fence all the way around.
I never said anything.
No,
I said-
no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I
Excuse
said
me,
that. I
excuse me,
was under
excuse
the-
me.
Let's,
Okay, let's not do it, never mind.
Have you done that?
I think so at this point. Are we going to still talk amongst ourselves?
We're not done here, this part, yes, we'll get to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Did you want to say something, Mrs. Hughes?
Yes, sir, he or she just said that it was a fence all the way around,
All right.
didn't she?
Okay. I'd have to go back and listen, I don't remember that.
Everybody here heard it.
I did say that. I was incorrect. I was under the impression there was a fence all the way around. That was incorrect. There's not. There's a gate.
If you read, better diagrams, there is no fence all the way around that we have, that I have anyways.
We don't have those.
Yeah, we, unfortunately, we do.
But like Mr. Weeks said, the gate in front, you can get around that.
Yep. Did you want anything else?
no.
Thanks. Any rebuttal? You're all set? I have a question for you, I mean, in the sense that, to me, the ordinance, yes, created a non-conforming use. And if it's not grandfathered, how do we get around that?
I don't believe you can get around it if it's not grandfathered. I completely agree with you. Under the ordinance as it stands today, it's a non-conforming use. My position on it is that Mr. Springer relied on what he was told by the code enforcement officer and the town as he moved forward. He wasn't trying to do anything under the covers. The entire time he was working with the town moving forward, he wasn't told until several months later that in fact this was a non-conforming use. So according to that, my position is that it should be grandfathered in simply because of his good faith reliance on what he was being told by the town.
And I understand the argument. My concern, if it is grandfathered, then these provisions that are currently on the books, such as odor control and security, technically would not apply to him if he's grandfathered.
I would say that they would apply to him. The grandfathering simply would be to get the use occupancy. He, however, would have to conform to the requirements of the ordinance as they stand today. That would not be grandfathered. And so he would have to use the odor control, the security, everything that's in that ordinance, he absolutely would have to.
So if we were to say, okay, we'll overrule the code enforcement officer and order him to issue the permit, we could make that a condition,
Absolutely,
that he comply with the requirements of the existing ordinance
absolutely.
with regards, okay.
Is the appeals board allowed to do that?
I'm sorry?
Is the appeals board allowed to do
Yes.
that?
Conditionally, we're just gonna add the conditions.
The condition that he has to comply with the existing requirements of 825. Thank you. Problem, Joe, huh? Yeah.
We talk now?
Yeah.
Okay, I can understand that if the building was already started and that the building, perhaps the building itself would be grandfathered. But I like the idea that we could put conditions on things. Are you sure we can do that? Yes. Okay. I also am thinking that one of the things that was written in the letter was that, you know, this building could be used for nothing else and that kind of thing. So, and then I was thinking that there was a fence all around, but there isn't a fence all around. So actually, you could remove, you could separate that new building from the other buildings and use it for something else.
Can't possibly do that.
It's close to the side of the thing, and, I mean, why could,
You can answer that one. It's in the
Excuse me. Joe? You wanna say something?
Did you close the public hearing?
No.
no.
Okay. I'll speak. So what was the question?
I was just wondering that one of the things is that the building, he started this building and it can't be used for anything else because it'll jeopardize the security of the rest of the thing, the rest of the facility, but the rest of the facility is not all protected apparently by a fence and all enclosed, and this building would be inside of it. So I'm saying that if he encloses the rest or excludes the new building, it can be used for something different.
Let me answer that, okay? I don't think that issue's before us, okay?
Okay?
That we're extending our jurisdiction, okay?
Okay.
We either gonna deny the appeal or approve the appeal.
Okay.
And if we approve the appeal, then I think we can put the condition that, well, you're acknowledging that he would be required. I'm not convinced of that, but I'll yield to you, but you're,
Okay.
making him put fences and separating it and carving it all up in a different way. That's not before us, okay? Anything else? I'm gonna close the hearing, and we can have our discussion.
Can I just,
Anything else? Go ahead,
just
John.
before, one
Thank you, John.
kind of a sticky detail. Prior to approving of a medical marijuana production facility, the part of the process is the chief of police is supposed to investigate whether or not the security apparatus is up to his standards. Would you be willing to include that as one of the preconditions for allowing us to overturn essentially the code enforcement officer's decision? Or would you be agreeable to, I understand that you said you'd agree to all the conditions to bring it up to the present land use ordinance requirements, including the previous 3 buildings. Would it also therefore also extend to the perimeter of the fence, the lighting, and allow for some abatement to ameliorate the effect of the extensive security lighting on the neighbors or abutters? Not that I'm not saying this is one of the preconditions and you must do,
No, I understand.
but
I can say that the entire facility will meet the requirements in 8.25 for medical marijuana facilities. So that includes what you were talking about with the security, the odor control, having the police come out, all of those sorts of things. As far as requiring him to extend the fence, to do something about the lighting, I don't believe that this is the proper place to require that. It's not required by the ordinance, and this board is required to follow the ordinance.
okay.
You prompted a question. With regard to the requirements in the current ordinance, he's agreeable to extending that to all the existing buildings?
Yes, what's in the current ordinance. And in fact, he should be compliant
You
right
hearing
now.
that? I
Yeah,
mean,
just like I said earlier, the filter systems that are going in the existing buildings at this time are happening. So that's one of the stipulations.
as I read 8.25.4, you're gonna have to submit an odor control plan. Right?
That's,
But,
Yeah, but you could do that.
Yeah, that's,
Well, yeah, but I would think that'd be part of the permit requirement, right?
Well, it wasn't part of the permit process.
We're talking about
No,
now.
Yes, well, maybe it wouldn't be part of a pre-approval, but it would be on file, something like that.
Well, I think the issue of the permit, he'd
Something
have
like
to
that.
meet that
Yeah.
odor control plan.
yeah, that would have to be inspected.
Well, that's the point, so if, and you're willing to do that with the other three buildings?
We're already working on it. That's not the issue.
That's not what I'm asking.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not what I'm asking.
I'm saying I'm gonna do it.
You understand what I'm saying?
yes, I understand what you're saying.
That
All the-
if we were to vote and overturn and approve the appeal, that it would be that this fourth building obviously would meet the requirements of the marijuana section in the current ordinance, and as far as the odor plan concerning for the abutters, we could extend that to the other three buildings?
Yes, my position is, and I tend to be pretty conservative in these things when I advise my clients, my position is that if this ordinance is here, then he needs to be abiding by this ordinance, no matter when the buildings were built or put into use. It's only things that would change to his detriment, things that he was already approved to do, that then he wouldn't be allowed to do, where he would be grandfathered in. But when this sort of thing comes into place, he needs to be following these things. And that's how I advise him as his attorney. He needs
Great.
to be compliant with all of these things,
Okay,
for all of the buildings.
All right?
I have a question about this. Normally, you know, so are you going to go before the planning board with this then? Just-
That's nothing to do with the planning board.
Following, I guess that's kind of what I'm asking
Nothing to do
is,
with the planning board,
this-
the code enforcement officer, that's his function, when he comes in with his permit, make sure that he satisfies the requirements of the ordinance. If he doesn't, then he says no on the permit, and then he can appeal to us. Nothing to do with the planning board. Correct?
That's right, because the building's already there.
Right. Anyways,
If it was
Okay.
a new production facility,
any
Okay.
further? Any
what
further?
about a new building?
a new building,
This-
if you
if-
would take out a permit today, you would have to go, if it says a major site plan review, that's what they would have to do.
Right, so if we do not grandfather this, or if we do not overturn your decision, then what would he be needing to do?
He's gonna be dead in the water.
Basically. He will appeal to the
Because it's
district
not
court.
allowed.
No,
That's what
no,
we've been talking about.
right, yes, well, I just wondered about
he can
how this
appeal-
works.
he can
Yes, I
appeal
know
beyond
that.
us.
I know that, that's happened
Okay,
before.
you all done, Pat?
Yes, thank you. I'm new with this, I'm working on it.
I think so.
I'm gonna close the hearing, so, Diane, I'll close the public hearing portion of this meeting. Okay. Oh, we got the choices, right?
So why don't we spell out what they are, if that's all right?
For one,
Can you hear Diane?
well, to me, one of the issues is the non-conforming. Well, non-conforming and grandfather, those are the issues, and then, you know,
And I still feel there's a piece of me that another issue should be the fact that this was done as a garage and not as a, not as a
But
cultivation
none of the other
facility.
permits say anything about medical marijuana.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I actually think that he should go to the planning board and get a conditional use permit, but I don't know how it would work. Because they would have to,
He can't
they would have to,
because
they would have to open
He
it up,
cannot get a conditional use permit.
because he's in the wrong zone, non-conforming.
I mean, one of the options is to grandfather him conditional. Put conditions on it.
I thought we were not allowed to put conditions.
I think we are. You want me to show it to you?
Yes. Yeah, because otherwise we're gonna, you know,
But
there's no point.
do you, and do we have to, if we were to do that, do we have to say anything about him not conforming to 8.2?
I'm sorry?
If we were to do that, do we have to say anything about him not conforming to 8.2? Like if 5 people went to the Board of Selectmen and said the Board of Appeals shouldn't have allowed him to do that under 8.2 because he's still, it still stinks, I can still smell it, there's a teenage kid walking on the, you know, whatever. Because what could happen? You know.
But you know, isn't it the, I think we've done this before, when it was the man who wanted to build the place, he wanted to build a house out, I don't even know where it was.
Too close to the
Too
water.
close to the water. And we told him that it was his responsibility to know what the ordinance was.
But the ordinance wasn't in effect.
But it is Mr. Springer's responsibility to know the law. And if the law changes, he should know the law, whether Joe tells him or not.
It started before the law changed in October. The law wasn't in effect yet until November. And that's where your issue is.
Right, I understand the construction of the building, however, the use of the building, which is why I was saying the garage, if he's going to use that as a garage, as a storage facility or something like that, that, you know, is different than another,
I think one of the other complaints was also that there are people coming and going at night, and there was noise from construction. Now, in general, it's a production facility, and we have a noise ordinance that you're not allowed to make noise after, I think it's 10:30 p.m. 10? Yeah.
It's 10 o'clock.
So we obviously wouldn't be having any loud activity. It's supposed to be just a growing facility.
non-conforming.
The board has inherent authority to attach conditions to its approval of an application.
Thank you, Ron. What page is that? I want to read it.
On page 28 of your manual.
Of the Board of Appeals manual? Thank you.
I was a little surprised when I read it.
What page was it again? Do you remember?
29.
29, thank you. 28, that's close enough.
All right.
All right. I'm still not sure that I'm sympathetic to one more building,
That's why my
but you feel that he's grandfathered because he started.
Well, Joe said three. He said three. I mean, to me, you know, I mean,
See,
I don't, yeah, he's not grandfathered because he started it, but because he had no other way to
the gray area.
get it approved before the law changed, I think. I don't know how, I don't even,
Sticky is Joe acknowledges that there was discussion in October. That makes it sticky. And Joe acknowledges
Uh-huh. But it's still up to every individual to,
I understand
Find
it,
out
but
the
he's a town
law.
officer, okay?
Mm.
You know?
Mhm.
And
well. Right,
in October, okay, I mean,
right.
he should have pulled a permit, and I'm sure if he knew that, you know, that this was gonna be on the books in November, he would have pulled the permit in October.
Mhm. So what I,
And we wouldn't be here, okay?
yeah,
So now the question becomes, at least in my mind, from a legal standpoint, he didn't have the permit. He didn't have the permit. We enact the ordinance. That's now a non-conforming use.
mhm.
You know?
Okay, before I,
And then, you know, the Listermore tells me that, you know, they're passing, gonna try to pass an amendment to the ordinance to allow this on Route 9, because it's allowed on Route 4, and they want to
To
do
make it
all the commercial stuff on Route 9.
rural,
Route
commercial,
4,
industrial
and
thing.
Route 236, they want all the commercial stuff out there. So in November.
Well, if that is in the,
November.
if that's in the RCI district, then they're gonna have to change some of the rules for the RCI district too.
They're working on it. So.
but I don't, they're not gonna, are they changing route? It doesn't matter at this point.
No, it doesn't, so.
So. And it also,
And, you know, I mean, you know, we gotta give a basis too. for
Upon.
Our conclusion.
mhm,
So bear that in mind when you vote.
mhm,
That's why I get these exhibits in there,
right,
so we have a record.
And-
Because if we deny this, you know, there's gonna be an appeal, obviously.
right. And so he says he can, he says that he has records, Springer has records that he started it, and Joe said that he started it. Is that correct? Joe said that he started the work.
Working on it in October. We're talking about. And Joe even said, did you hear that part, Pat?
Tell me.
That he thought it was gonna be on Route 9.
Yeah.
He missed it.
And I think it wasn't helpful that we had a switch of code enforcement officers because we
Yeah.
had nobody really going out to check on the progress and that kind of thing, so that kind of puts us. Okay, so he's also talking about building 5, so I trust that that will not be allowed. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
What's that?
Which one?
I hope you pursue, I hope you
Three there
pursue
now.
the
The
whole
fourth one
smell,
is
the
out.
whole
Four.
complaints that you have. And also, I don't know if you've been going and voting, but we've been voting on these things. Every time there's
No, no.
voting, we're voting
Don, Pat.
on this medical marijuana stuff.
Wait a minute, whoa. This is totally inappropriate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you know, they- okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Totally inappropriate.
Thank you, Ron.
Yep. Well, we
Have
gotta
we-
make a
have we
motion
heard-
here and then.
have we heard from the lady that was
and get
recording
some
it?
discussion, huh? What'd you say?
Have we heard from the lady that was doing the recording for a while?
No.
Okay, and she's still here? We need, I guess we gotta,
So we need a motion to, so we can get this, we gotta make some findings too.
Yes.
So, and some
Okay,
conclusions.
and, all right.
So, somebody make a motion one way or the other so we can get to that.
Let's make a motion that we,
With Diane,
yeah,
motion to what? To deny or
to
grant,
deny
or grant the
or
appeal,
grant
which
the-
one?
grant it,
You wanna grant, motion to grant the appeal
yeah.
with any condition?
Yeah, with the conditions
With
of,
conditions. The ordinance requirements.
ordinance requirement.
And John? What was your requirement, John? I wrote down police.
just that he conform to, where did I put the code? conform to 25.2 completely
No,
with all the three
all the
buildings.
825, right. All the 825 requirements, why don't we do
Right.
that, okay? 825 requirement. So that's your motion?
Yeah.
Your motion is to grant the appeal on the condition that the applicant comply with all the requirements in our ordinance under section 8.25.
Right.
Is there a second?
And
Is there a second? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just trying to think if we want to add any other conditions. I don't know if we.
Let's get a second in, and then
Okay,
we can go back and amend if we feel that, okay?
okay. I second the motion that we
You second the motion,
grant the appeal and
okay?
overturn the code enforcement officers pursuant
Okay.
to the conditions of
Discussion.
8.25.
What would be your conclusion or your basis for that?
That the applicant was conducting his application for a medical marijuana facility under a previous ordinance, and its changes are not his, not under his control, or under his and its changes, although they affect his business and constrain his business, they are not under his control at all. So, the applicant was acting in good faith, I guess. That's what I was saying.
Matt?
And
Go ahead.
it should be just for this building 4, no more, no other buildings.
Well, it is limited. It is.
Should
I'm
be
sorry, I
limited.
can't hear that, Diane. What?
Well, we're just talking about building 4,
Right.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
but, go ahead. I'm gonna make an amendment to the motion anyway.
Mhm.
Okay, I mean,
So now we've had a second, but we're discussing it.
Yes,
Okay, all right.
this is discussion.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna make an amendment, and to be all candid, the amendment is gonna be that he comply with all the buildings
All the
comply.
buildings, right.
All four, yeah, correct, that's right.
But I
Okay.
think the order thing is the problem.
Yeah, that is
The
a
order
problem.
thing wasn't there, that probably
Wouldn't be
wouldn't be as
such an
much.
issue.
All right.
There'd be some concerns, obviously.
I'm concerned also, in the back of my mind, I'm very worried that the Board of Selectmen is gonna have to make some adaptations to that 8.2 to make sure that, you know, if he's all of a sudden bottling oil or something, some teenager wants to buy a bottle of oil and now he's,
But they can't sell.
you know, you gotta be, it's
And all
just
he
too
wants is-
far reaching.
All he wants is to cultivate.
Right.
Right. But he
well,
doesn't,
no,
he doesn't
wants to
control
make
what his
oils
tenants,
and stuff too.
he
I'm
doesn't,
sorry?
They already said they
Okay.
can't sell in the state of Maine.
Oh, right,
All he's doing is cultivating.
but he can give those to his patients.
Correct.
The caregivers that are in
The
there
caregivers,
have
right.
Right,
their
they
list
can,
of their patients
Right.
and
They sell it to their patients.
Yeah.
They sell it.
maybe we should say in the wording that comply with the medical marijuana production facilities caregivers limitations. Caregivers
That's
facility
safe already.
limitations.
Or
That's
maybe that they-
it's a little too specific.
All we can do, I think, is
right, is what's in our,
tie him to his.
in our
Okay.
zoning.
I guess that's
and he
being,
must have to follow all the state rules
Correct.
anyway.
Correct,
Well, all those caregivers are gonna be licensed.
right,
They've gotta get a license. Right? Yeah.
yep,
well, they just associate with him. He's just the landlord.
That's all
Right.
he's got nothing to do with it, really.
Right.
He just rents it.
Right.
He just has to make sure the buildings comply
Comply.
to what.
Okay.
My only, so like, when a new facility comes into town and they go before the planning board with this stuff, they can also put additional requirements on them
Correct.
that we cannot do
Right.
here.
And be candid with you. I feel comfortable, we can put conditions because they'll be happy. And I go up to you, 'cause I think, I'm not really convinced that we can. but
You're not
if-
convinced we can put conditions?
Well, no, that's what it says, but
It's not, yeah, right, I agree. I think we should.
we're gonna go out
I
on
think
the
we
limb,
definitely
that's all,
should.
folks, we're gonna go out. If we're
Right.
gonna head in that direction.
Right.
So I'm gonna make a motion that we amend Diane's motion to include all 4 buildings.
Right.
Is there a second to the amendment?
I second the amendment to
A
include all
motion to
4
amend,
buildings.
Right. Any discussion on the motion to amend? All those in favor? There be any discussion on the motion to amend her motion,
I don't think so.
just to extend it to all 4 buildings? All those in favor? Aye. 4-0. Okay, and now the motion is amended. Let me read it to be clear, and then we'll vote.
Do we
On the
need
motion.
Joe here to vote,
Sorry.
or no? It doesn't matter? No?
Here he is.
We're getting ready to take a vote.
Cooling down.
Huh? We're getting ready to take a vote.
Okay.
And it's being recorded anyways. And the motion that's on the floor is to grant the appeal with the condition that the applicant comply with section 8.2, all the requirements of section 8.25 of the town land use ordinance, and that all those requirements extend not just to the building under the current permit, but all 4 buildings that are on site. That's the motion that's been seconded. Any further discussion? There being none, Diane,
Yes.
John,
I vote yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Four zero. A motion to adjourn.
I second it.
I make it.
Thank you. 4-0. It's different.